Tokugawa Japan. Ruled under the frightening and austere Tokugawa Iemitsu in the 17th century. Iemitsu had imposed the isolation policy to avoid influence from abroad, like the influence of Jesuit missionaries and spreading Christianity. The shogun forced all foreigners out of the country, even persecuting them. For 250 years, trade with other foreign nations was prohibited, with the exception of trading with the Dutch, Portuguese, and Chinese. The isolation brought Japan peace, stability, and the development of various kinds of arts. But then came the black ships from the United States of America. The arrival of the U.S. flotilla under Commander Matthew Perry in 1853 on July 8th was the first to break Japan's peace from isolation during the Tokugawa era. They were called the Black Ships of Evilmen by the frightened Japanese who first encountered them. Commander Perry, commanding a squadron of 2 steamers and vessels, arrived in Edo Bay, which today is known as the Tokyo Bay. When Perry arrived, none of the Japanese who encountered the arrival of the black ships understood English, and nobody aboard Perry's ships could speak Japanese. With the Translation Bureau, which gathered information about the West and had translated atlases and thesauruses, Perry was able to communicate and demanded to see the shogun, but wasn't allowed to. For several days, there were miscommunications and threats thrown against Americans, but the black ships did not leave. Perry stubbornly waited, blocking the shipping lanes of Edo, making it clear that he wouldn't leave until he could complete his intended mission. The shogun demanded that Commander Perry leave Japan, but Perry refused to. And as it was his main mission, insisted for the letter from the U.S. President Fillmore to the Japanese Emperor to be delivered. The letter asked Japan to agree to breaking Japan's isolation policy, and in favor of making trade with Japan, signed diplomatic and commercial treaties with America, the main being the Treaty of Kanagawa, the Treaty of Peace and Amity. Perry declared that he would return after a year to see what decision Japan would make, expecting for Japan to comply with America's demand to sign the treaty and open up to the West for trade. And if not, he would take Japan with force. As he promised, 1 year later, on March 13th, 1854, he returned with a much larger and more intimidating fleet. It comprised of 10 ships with more than 100 mounted cannons and 1,500 men. The Tokugawa shogunate was thrown into a state of turmoil. The daimyos wanted to go to war, while the emperor wanted to keep the foreigners out of the country. The Japanese were amazed, fascinated, and at the same time intimidated by the large and robust American locomotions. The Perry's black ships were nothing like the Japanese had ever seen before, and upon seeing how hopeless and weak the Japanese small military was against the powerful and enormous U.S. military and their advanced and superior weaponry, Shogun had no choice but to sign the Treaty of Kanagawa on March 31st of 1854. This onforth meant that America and Japan would have a good and friendly alliance. A U.S. consulate in Japan would be permitted. Japanese ports would be opened up for trade, and American vessels or whaling ships to pass through. Supplies of provisions and coal would be provided for American ships to take. and protection for shipwrecked foreigners would be provided. After Perry's visit, Japan was forced to end its isolation, and new treaties were signed with Russia, Britain, and the Netherlands. And due to these new treaties that were being signed, lots of political and social changes took place undetermined, which created great turmoil and political unrest. The ruling shogun was unable to do anything about these problems that were brought by the foreign trade. And so this led to the collapse of the Tokugawa shogunate, the Edo Bakufu. It was the last Bakufu in Japanese history. Upon seeing America's far more advanced and excellent technology, Japan realized how far their economy was falling behind other countries and that their technology had to be updated. The industrialization and modernization of Japan that had to happen took place in the 19th century. And so, the Meiji Restoration had begun.